and welcome to Archive Dive. I'm Maria Lockwood, a reporter with the Superior Telegram. Each month, we dip into files on historic events, people, and places in Superior and Douglas County with local historians. Today, we'll take a trip back to the heyday of Superior shipbuilding. In May of 1943, the famous Dionne Quintuplets visited Superior to launch 5 cargo ships at once at the Butler Shipyards. At the age of 8, the Canadian girls, the first quintuplets known to survive their infancy, were already bona fide superstars. We'll discuss their visit and the importance of Superior shipbuilding during World War II. Helping us dive into this story today is local historian Teddy Meronek. Hello, Teddy.
Hi, Maria.
Thanks for joining us.
Oh, you're welcome.
So, the Dionne quintuplets were a big deal.
They were. I knew about the Dionne quintuplets before I knew that there were ships built in Superior during World War II. I'm ashamed to admit that, but my mother had a scrapbook when I was young that she had started to put together when she was young, and she would, clip out things from the newspaper, like friends of hers getting married or, engagement pictures. But in there, she had a picture of the Dionne quintuplets, cut from the newspaper. And in those days, they actually did appear in the Telegram almost every day.
Really?
From the time they were born, yes. When I do the mural tour at the Superior Public Library, I always tell people they were the Kardashians of the 1930s. So I knew about them, and I asked my mom about them, and she would answer all my questions. She was so good about that, and she always knew a lot about history. And then she would always get to a point where she would look at me and say, maybe you ought to go to the library and see if there's a book about them. And then I found out about them. I read this book, which is still on the library shelves, called We Were Five, that the sisters, the Dionnes, wrote about their life. And that was the beginning of it. It wasn't until many years later I learned about shipbuilding in Superior, unfortunately.
But the fact that they came to Superior, was that the only time they came to Superior?
That was the only time they came to Superior. It was the first time they'd been out of Canada. Ever. And they were almost 9 years old when they came here. But they had an interesting life and a very sad life. They were actually wards of the King of England.
The King of England, though they were in Canada.
Well, it's one of the Commonwealth countries, so the king was their monarch. Wow. But they were also governed by the provincial government of Ontario, where they lived. Okay. And so they could do nothing without the permission of the government. And there'd always been people approaching the family to have the girls go somewhere. I think they were offered $1 million to go to the New York World's Fair, but they chose to come to Superior instead because they were happening at the same time. And
we won over the World's Fair?
We did, and it was, I'm sure, to do with Robert Butler, who was the president of the shipbuilding company in Superior. And he was quite a showman in his own way. He was always getting movie stars to come here, Ann Baxter and Ingrid Bergman. They were both, but he saved the best, it seems to me, for Duluth because they were both at the Riverside Yard and they didn't come to Superior. But maybe he did save the best for Superior because the Dionnes were just hugely, I want to say popular. I don't know. People were sort of obsessed with these 5 little girls. So that was quite a coup for him. And they weren't paid any money.
Oh, really? So they could have gotten $1 million and gone to the World Fair, or they could just come hang out in Superior for free.
Right.
And that's what they did.
That's what they did because these 5 ships that they were cargo ships, they were going to England for the war effort. And so that meant something to the Canadian government too, so they came here.
And they were wards of the state at the time, or were they back with their family at that point?
That it was just happening then where they were going back with their parents. They had been raised separately from the rest of their family. When Mrs. Dionne gave birth to the quintuplets, those were her 10th children. She had 5 before.
Wow.
And then she had 3 or 4 after that. So it was a huge family, but they were raised separately from their siblings. They had their own little house and a nursery, and they called it a hospital too. And then they had a viewing space that people came from all over
to
see them.
Or something?
Yeah, it was something like that, and they were just put out into the yard to play, and then people would come by.
Would people pay to come watch them then?
Yes. I mean, they made millions of dollars for everyone except for themselves. They made millions of dollars for the government, for everybody who was involved. And they had trust funds, but apparently they were borrowed from liberally by people.
Did they do a lot of spokesman sort of things? Was that a deal back then? Like, here's the breakfast cereal of the Dionne quintuplets?
Right, yeah. They had their images were all over the place. There were dolls created, the Dionne quintuplets quintuplet dolls and that. It was not a happy thing at all. And they really had a tough time adjusting to being back with a family that they were never raised with. And the government said they took, they became wards of the government because their families did not have the financial know-how to take care of them. They didn't know about finances and they didn't know about how to take care of these kids. And I thought, well, she raised 5 kids before this, but I don't know if it was the money involved or were they actually protecting these kids? But that didn't seem right to me because it seemed like their parents cared about them, but it was a struggle when they hadn't been together for so many years to readjust to that.
Right.
And they were special. They were always going to be special. So you're not going to exactly fit in with the rest of your siblings because you're the money makers in the family, apparently, So very sad.
What were their names?
Their names were Annette, Émilie, Marie, Yvonne, and Cécile.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the ships that they came to send out, were they named after the quintuplets or were they of different names?
Well, they said they were going to be named after them, but the names of the ships were decided long before they were even built. And there was this old sort of story that if you change the names after they had been originally named, that it was bad luck for anyone who sailed on them. So they didn't name them after the girls, but together they called them the Quint Fleet.
The Quint Fleet?
The Quint Fleet, the 5 ships. So.
Do you know what the 5 ships' names were?
Oh, they were some weird names.
And they were cargo ships. Now, did all of them end up in the war effort?
They ended up somewhere around the world, delivering goods to people. If you read about World War II history, which I've sort of gotten into this aspect of it about how we supplied Great Britain with everything they needed because they needed everything for the war and how many ships were lost, cargo ships going across the Atlantic because German submarines were, torpedoing them. I don't know if we could make them fast enough.
Oh, wow.
For what was going on in the Atlantic. But it's interesting. And you read, about shipbuilding in Superior and Duluth, and we weren't building the fancy, the warships. We were building the working ships here in the Twin Ports.
So we were the blue collar ships over here. We were the. And
Gordon McQuarrie wrote a great article for the Milwaukee Journal about the Quints coming to Superior, and he spent quite a bit of that article talking about if they hadn't hemmed and hawed about the St. Lawrence Seaway, we could have been building much bigger ships here in the Twin Ports. Because part of the problem too was that once you build them here, you have to find a place that you can get them out to where they're going, and that place is through Lake Superior and Lake Michigan, down through Chicago, and you hit the Mississippi and you're going to go out that way. But see, that was part of the problem. They wouldn't fit.
Right.
Bigger boats wouldn't make it. So
all 5 of these boats were launched in a day.
Right.
Is that the most that had ever been launched at one point?
Anywhere, I guess.
Really?
Yeah.
In any shipyard?
Right. 5 in one day.
Okay.
Butler's had done 2 in one day. I think it was Armistice Day, which we now know is Veterans Day. The year before they launched 2 in one day, which was sort of a big deal then. But the 5, that was amazing.
How many ships were they producing at this point? I mean, did they have to hold on to them for a couple of years to get all 5 to go out at once? Or
I don't know how that worked.
Many a year?
Well, I think Jerry Sandvik wrote a good book about shipbuilding in the Twin Ports. And I think in total in the Twin Ports, there were about 200 ships produced during the war. And of course, they worked around the clock at Butler's. I'm sure they did at Globe too in Superior. They work around the clock to get these ships out because they had a lot of government contracts to build these things. So, when you're working 24/7, and they were, even in those days, you could probably produce a lot. So.
And it wasn't just men working down there either.
Well, Butler was very slow in hiring women to work the manual labor jobs.
Really?
Globe hired welders who were women much earlier than Butler did. Butler, I think it was probably late into 1944 when they first hired the first women who were working actually on the boats.
But Globe started hiring female welders how?
Earlier than that. I don't know which year it was exactly, but they were ahead of Butler.
Okay.
I mean, they employed a lot of women down there in the offices and things. But
how did the shipbuilding between Globe and Butler here in Superior compare? Did they both turn out about the same number of boats?
I think Butler was a little bit bigger, maybe.
Okay.
It was interesting, that originally where they were located on the waterfront had been the first Globe shipyard in Superior that left in 1922. And apparently what was left behind was turned into a dump. And so Robert Butler came in, and they like built this shipyard like almost overnight. I mean, I think they started in late 1941, and they launched their first ship in June of 42. I mean,
wow.
They were really fast.
Mm-hmm. Did he already have shipworks here in Duluth and then just started them in Superior, or did he start in Superior and then Duluth?
The thing about Robert Butler is that I think this was the first time he ever built a shipyard.
Oh,
they have this pamphlet about the company, and they built a lot of things. They built hospitals. They built churches. They built apartment buildings. I mean, he was in the construction business, but he hired all these people who knew about, how do you run a shipyard? How do you build a shipyard? And that was his, that was his genius. And they did it very quickly, and they left just as quickly too. Last contract, that was it. They were gone in 45. Last contract finished, of the ship, and they just pulled out where Globe stayed.
And Globe was there before too, right?
It wasn't the same Globe. It wasn't the same Globe.
Oh, right. You mentioned there was the old Globe,
and I think they chose that name to honor the first Globe shipyard. I'm sure somebody will tell me I'm wrong, but I think that's what I read.
Were they in the same area of the harbor? Were they far apart?
You never see a map of those days. I think, I'm probably wrong about this, but I think the Globe actually morphed into Fraser.
Okay.
And Butler was in a different area. But the interesting thing about Globe is that was a local. I mean, the people who put that organization together to build the shipyard were all local men who were from Superior, where Butler came from out of town. His headquarters were in St. Paul.
Okay, so he came in, just made a bunch of boats in a quick amount of time, and then left.
Sort of like those people who built Superior in the first place, you
Really?
know. They came in the 1880s, 1890s. Sometimes didn't even come here, threw their money at us, and then left. But Globe, they were all local people. In fact, Victor Nelson, people may not really be familiar with the name, but he and his wife are the ones who gave the money to Superior High School for the scholarship, the big Nelson Scholarship.
Those are like full ride scholarships for a number of years.
That is off of the money that Victor and Mary Nelson made during their lifetime here in Superior. Yeah.
Through the Globe. All right. So you don't have a total of ships, but...
Oh, no. It was 200, I thought, totally.
Was there rivalry between Globe and Butler, or were they? I can
imagine there was. I think they made some of the same kind of ships, but I think they also had their own things that they made too that the other yard probably didn't make. You know, Butler was somebody who knew how to get like publicity for his yard. He really knew how to do that by getting people to come in. You know, like Dick Bong was there several times for bond raising. You know, selling war bonds, you know, as part of that. And he really knew how to advertise what he was doing. And I don't think they had any trouble finding workers.
Even though it was right during World War II?
Yeah, you know, there were so many people moving to Superior because you're just coming out of the Great Depression. And people want jobs, and so they're moving to Superior. There weren't even enough houses or apartments in Superior. They set up like trailer parks.
Really? And
moved in trailers so people... men and women who were working there could live there with their families. Okay. So it was a big, you know, it did a lot to help Superior, who until 1941 were really struggling to get out of the Depression. And so once they moved in.
That helped a lot.
Yeah.
And so he was the showman, and he brought in the Dionne Quintuplets. Was that kind of the pièce de résistance of his advertising efforts?
And he had a daughter, Catherine, who was about 10 years old at the time. You see her picture a lot in the newspapers. And it must have been very exciting to be that age, and your dad is launching a ship like every other day at the shipyards. But she was sent to Canada to extend the invitation to the Dionne Quintuplets. It was just sort of a publicity thing because it all had to apparently the deal had to be hammered out between the government in Ontario and the State Department in the United States to get these girls here. Yeah.
Because just the crossing the border was a big issue.
It was a big deal, and because of who they were, you know, and even photographs of them were protected. There was one I think it was called King Enterprises, that had the specific, they were the only ones who were supposed to take pictures of them.
Okay. So the pictures that were taken in Superior, were the telegram photographers allowed to take any? Oh, so those were all from this.
Those, yes, they were copyrighted
company.
by them, and that was specifically theirs. You'll see shots of the shipyard that day and of other things that are going on that telegram, sent a photographer to. But no, the girls, that was, they made a lot of money off those little girls, so they were very protective,
I guess,
of their pictures.
And they came down by train?
Yeah, at first they said they were going to come down by ship. I thought that was kind of funny. It would have taken them how long to get here from Canada? I don't know. Across Lake Superior. And then they finally decided they would come by train. They even said that President Roosevelt was going to come here when they launched these 5 ships, because he was interested in, he had been Secretary of the Navy early in his career, but that wasn't going to happen. And I'm surprised he didn't, because he had been here. I mean, he came to Superior in the 1890s, and supposedly, we never found verification of this, was saved from drowning during a ship launching.
Okay, but we don't have any proof.
I don't have any proof. Apparently, there was no one there, like at the JFK appearance at Central High School, that nobody was taking pictures.
Right.
But he didn't show up. But they came by train. And then when they were actually going to come to the launch site, the train brought them to a certain point on the Hewitt Slip. No, what was it? Yeah, they came by train, and then they had to take a boat a little way to get to the launch site. And they said there were between 18,000 and 25,000 people at the launching.
Where did they put them all?
They built bleachers. There's great pictures. It's amazing how many people are there when you look at it. But they had been preparing for this for months. And apparently they had a committee set up for the Quint launching, and people went door to door in Superior asking if there were rooms that people who were coming to town could stay in, because the hotels had been booked up a couple months ahead of time.
It's like Grandma's Marathon weekend.
Yeah, it was the same thing. And they'd gotten extra rations for the restaurants, so they'd have enough food to feed people, because they expected so many. They set up a tourist booth on Tower Avenue, and then also at the old Superior Water Light building on Tower Avenue, they had an information desk there where you could, try to get tickets, which I'm sure were impossible. To attend the launching.
Wow.
I mean, everything was going on. They had this, the Quint Fleet Committee was downtown putting up banners on the streetlights and everything. I mean, it was a big deal.
Do you know how far away people came? Because this was their first U.S. appearance, right?
Right.
Ever.
I've never read anything about that, but Gordon McQuarrie, as I said, has the best article about the Quint visit. And he said that people were saving up their gas ration coupons so they would have enough gas to drive here. So they must have been coming from, I'm sure it was harder to get here too because of rationing. You had to worry about, am I going to have enough gas to get to work, or do I want to go see the Dionne quintuplets? Well, apparently a lot of people chose that. So I don't know, they could have come from very far away. I'm sure there are people here from the cities.
Right.
For sure, yeah.
Did they do any kind of meet and greet after the ship, or did they just come, they knocked the bottles on the masts and then headed back?
That's about the extent of it.
Really?
They did have a ceremony at the shipyards. The girls came in and they had was it 2 hours? I think of a program. They had, the Butler Band. They had a band and they performed there.
Like members of the crew?
Members of the people who work there. They had a band. I mean, they had everything. They had a theater group. They had sports teams. I mean, it was a full service shipyard. Yeah, just from the people who work there.
Okay.
And then they had, of course, every dignitary. Canada, the United States, and Minnesota got in on it too. So, and they had to speak. And the whole thing took about 2 hours. And all I could think of was those poor little girls plus English was not their first language, French was. So they're sitting through this, I'm sure it was a very long ceremony. But the only thing they did, they had like a 10-minute interview with a reporter from Canadian Broadcasting that went out over the radio, but I read that they only knew like 300 words of English, but that's like 298 more than I know of French. So,
oui.
So, it was sort of a back and forth questions with them that they obviously must have been prompted a little bit, and they did sing God Bless America in English. They were going to do the Star Spangled Banner, but it was too hard for them to learn. which is probably too hard for a lot of, Americans to learn too.
Yes.
But they had that little program with them. And at first it was said that Princess Margaret, who was the late Queen Elizabeth's sister, and probably was kind of around the age of the girls at that time, that she was supposed to make a broadcast from England at that time for the ship launching, but I don't think that ever took place. Must have been just too hard to figure out. But everybody else anybody was there.
So the governor?
I think the governor was there. Who was it? Like the local representatives and things too, where people there were giving speeches too.
Did they have anyone from the U.S. government?
I think there was, not the
Not
president,
like the president,
the vice president or anything, And then I think one of the most interesting things about it is, since they were little girls and they were christening the ships, which are usually done with champagne bottles, they got them smaller bottles, like pint size or whatever, and they were wrapped in red, white, and blue ribbon. And one story said that they had water from Niagara Falls in the bottle, but then I read another story that said they had commingled water from Lake Superior and from Niagara Falls.
Okay.
Sort of to represent the whole Canadian American thing. And so they used the smaller bottles to christen the ships.
Wow. Okay. Did they spend the night? Did they just head back home? What happened to them after this ceremony?
I think they came in the day before.
Okay.
Because they were Catholic, and they went to Mass at the bishop's residence, which was on 2nd Street at that time. It had been Dr. Conan's house. It's gone now. They tore that down many, many years ago. But he had a chapel in the house. And so they went to Mass there first. And then the ceremony took place on Mother's Day. So they came, after they had gone to Mass, they went down to the shipyards.
Okay.
So,
awesome.
Yeah. They didn't stay overnight then. Then they went right back to Canada after that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how long did their fame last?
I imagine there's people who are still, sort of interested in them, but one of them died.
Was he 20?
Like 20 or something like that. But I just think people were still interested. But, when your little babies are always so fascinating to everyone, they're always so cute and all that. And then I suppose once that they were old enough, when they were 18, they left home and, wanted to do something else. So, but I think there's still people who are interested who know them, although nobody, you have to be probably of a certain age to even remember them.
There's only two still
living?
Two
still living, yeah. And I read that the chance of quintuplets surviving birth is 1 in 57 million.
Even today?
I don't know about today, but
back then,
at that time, that was, because there had been other sets of quintuplets born, but they never survived more than a few days. And apparently they were, when Mrs. Dionne was pregnant, she had a miscarriage in the 3rd month. So there were actually 6 babies.
Wow.
But she'd lost one of them. So it's pretty amazing when you think about it. They kept them wrapped up in, I think they had like something in the basket, like heated stones or something. I don't remember what it was. And they put them in with the babies, wrapped them up in blankets, and then they put them in front of the oven, open the oven door and set them on the door to keep them warm. And my Aunt Josephine, that's what they did with her. She was born and she was about 2 pounds. And that's how they kept her alive, was wrap her up and put her in front of the oven. And they fed them milk mixed with corn syrup, water, and a little rum.
Really?
Yes.
Babies.
And that's what they gave it to them in eyedroppers.
Wow. How big were they? I mean, how small?
Totally, the 5 of them together weighed 13 pounds. Totally. So they ranged, I read one place the smallest was 1.5 pounds and the biggest maybe 3, but totally it was 13 pounds.
I can't even imagine.
I can't even imagine. They said they looked when they were born, their heads were so big and their arms and legs were like sticks.
Not fully developed, maybe.
But they got good care, I guess. And it's amazing in those days that they could survive.
Right.
The Red Cross took care of them, I think, the first 2 years.
Wow.
It was a big day for Superior. Gordon McQuarrie said, this is the biggest day in Superior since Calvin Coolidge came here to set up his summer White House.
There you go. Put us back in a national spotlight.
Yes, yeah. And it taught me a lot about shipbuilding in Superior.
Right, which you didn't even know about until...
I didn't, and I think that's a shame that I went through all my education, and I'm a history major, a college history major, that nobody ever talked about Superior history and all the interesting things that happened here. But to grow up and not know about shipbuilding in Superior, of course I knew about Fraser Shipyards, but what did that have to do with the Dionne quintuplets in World War II? I didn't know.
Connected the dots.
Right, finally.
And I know you like to tell people they're like the Kardashians of their age, but unlike the Kardashians, they didn't seek the limelight.
No.
They kind of had it forced on them.
They did. And for what reason? Because you were 5 identical babies born. You know, it had nothing to do with you individually. I think that would be hard to go through your life, that the only reason you're well known is because you look like your 4 sisters. You know, and they said they varied in weight like 3 pounds. When they came to Superior, that was the only difference, in an 1.5 inch difference in some of their heights. But they were very, very, very much alike. So I don't know. It's a sad story. And, you know, everybody was so excited about them, but I don't know if they were very excited about themselves at that time. If you look at pictures of them that you do see that they had been taken in Superior, they always look so like wary. You know, why am I here and why am I doing this? The library has a mural. The public library has a mural. One of their murals is of the Dionne quintuplets that day. Just sad. You know, until you really start digging into it, you don't really understand the story.
Right. I mean, it was a great publicity for Superior,
right,
and it highlighted something very important that we were doing, but it was unkind to the Dionne quintuplets,
right,
the life they were living.
Yeah, but we didn't know that back then. So.
Okay. Has there ever been, since then, anything as big? Gordon McQuarrie said there wasn't anything prior to that as big other than Calvin Coolidge.
Right.
Can you think of anything else that kind of is in that ballpark?
I don't really think so.
More recently, no?
I mean, we've always, what surprises me about Superior is how many presidents or people who were going to be president, you know, visited this small town in northern Wisconsin. That always surprises me, you know, everyone who's come through here. Well, the Brule River had a lot to do with that, because there were a lot of people who wanted to fish. Eisenhower came here before he was president. He got off at the station in Superior and went out to the Brule with his brothers, I believe, to fish.
Oh, okay.
McKinley was here.
Wasn't Grant here?
They say Ulysses S. Grant. Yeah, I don't know. Well, Hoover was here. He came that same summer. Kennedy, Trump was here. President Biden's been here.
Twice.
Yeah, twice. So
Gore was here.
Was Al Gore here?
Al Gore was here.
Okay. But it's surprising. But, you know, Superior was the second largest city in Wisconsin for a long time. Isn't that when you think about that, you think, oh my gosh, how did that happen? That Madison, you know, Milwaukee was, of course, the biggest.
Right.
But it's just surprising.
We're definitely not.
And we're not anymore, but we were at one time. We were a big deal. And I don't know, they built ships in Manitowoc. They built submarines in Manitowoc.
Okay.
But we were the only, I think Duluth and Superior were the only shipyards on Lake Superior.
Okay. So
during World War II,
right,
you know, and Manitowoc was building, of course, the submarines down there. I wonder how easy they were to get to where they were going.
I don't know, but they never had the Dionne quintuplets come.
That's right, they didn't.
All right. Well, thank you.
You're welcome. This has been fun. My favorite topic is Superior during World War II.
Okay, we'll remember that.
Yeah.
All right. And thank you for listening to Archive Dive. New episodes are available monthly at superiortelegram.com or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you have a topic you'd like us to explore, email me at mlockwood@superiortelegram.com.